have a mug of tea because I feel like it's necessary to spill the tea on Crimes of Grindelwald. So hey nerds, what's up? Today's video is going to be a little bit salty, but that's alright. I have some feelings on the Crimes of Grindelwald movie, and I decided I was going to make a video about it because I was talking about it on Twitter. I was talking about it with Spencer and Rhiannon and Chelsea and Becky and Bex the other day after we did our live show for the Raven Cycle read-along, and I just have a lot of things to say, so I decided that I needed to dedicate a video to it. So let's get right on into this. Spoilers everywhere. If you haven't seen the movie yet and you don't want to be spoiled for what happens in this movie, click off now. There are some small things about this movie that I didn't like, that I could have forgiven had it not been all of it that I hated. There were also some things that I did like about this movie, but overwhelmingly there was just so much I had that was an issue. And I feel like a lot of my issues actually come from what has to be deleted scenes. Like, the plot was not consistent or congruent or anything. It did not follow a linear line, and I think that that is due to scenes being cut. And I say that from watching a lot of videos now and watching people talk about it on different websites, and there are scenes that were in trailers that were not in the movie, and so there's just some evidence to speak to the fact that we're missing dialogue in this film, which is really unfortunate. I don't understand why they would choose to cut out essential plot point scenes rather than cut out more random fire dragons. What? This video, I can promise you, is not going to be linear, but I'm not a film director of a $1 million franchise, so forgive me. I guess let's try to sprinkle in some pros throughout this video. One thing that I did like about this movie was how pretty it was. It's weird because some of these things I'm going to say that I liked, and then I'm going to break it down and say that I didn't. I don't actually think it was a good choice. For example, the costuming in this movie was so pretty. Everything looked well made and tailored, and I love the 1920s fashion of that time frame. So I loved getting to see these actors in those clothes. However, at the same time, it doesn't match with what we already know about this universe. In the 90s, when the first set of Harry Potter movies happen, and books, everyone in the wizarding world is still in the 1800s. They have not continued their fashion sense with the rest. They wear robes, they are stuck in they don't like any of the muggle, for example, Dumbledore brings out a business card. That's very present day. But in the 90s, 40, 50, 60 years later, 50 to 60 years later in the 90s, they're still using parchment to make any sort of note or whatever to pass along because they're still stuck in the 1800s. So why does Dumbledore give Newt Scamander a business card? Why are they all in very high present fashion? It doesn't match. However, it was pretty to look at, so I could almost guarantee you that that's why. It was a movie decision made so that they could put them in cool outfits. I did really like some of the name dropping that we got. I thought that some of that could have been really well done and well pandered to the Harry Potter audience that they know are who's coming to watch these first. These movies were made for Harry Potter fans, and I'm going to talk about this a lot throughout this video because part of me liked it and part of me thought that they just did a crap job at it. For example, the reason that they include Minerva McGonagall, in this movie was to pander to us. However, if they thought about it for 5 extra seconds, they would have realized that that doesn't match with how old she is. She shouldn't exist yet. Rhiannon from Crescent Moon Reads actually did the math. She would be in 8 years from the time frame of this movie being made is when she's supposed to be alive. She shouldn't be a teacher, but I did like that they tried to do it. They also did name drop, McLaggen is the name that they give the student who stands up for Dumbledore. The small stuff like that I did really like. That's obviously a great-great-grandfather or great-grandfather or whatever of McLaggen, who is in number 6. Those in theory were great because the wizarding world is a very small group of people. Like, that makes sense that we would get name drops like that. And if they hadn't bombarded us with them and fucked up the timeline, I think they would have been well done. That being said, let's go into the con about some of these name drops that I didn't like. We have all of these lead characters who are introduced in this movie that are all names that we know. We know the Dumbledores. We know their siblinghood, and told to us at the very end of the movie that Credence is actually a Dumbledore. And the problem with this, if it's not a lie, if he actually is the brother of Dumbledore, there is a lot more explaining that needs to be done, because we in canon already know Dumbledore's siblings. We know Aberforth was his brother. We know that him and Aberforth do not get along because back in the day, him, Aberforth, and Grindelwald all fought in front of Ariana, who was sick, and an Obscurial, which is new information, the term, from these movies. And while they were fighting, Ariana was angry. She exploded with magic, and nobody knows to this day who killed Ariana because they were fighting. This is well known. We know that his sister died. We know that that is why him and his brother do not get along. We have never fucking heard of another brother that died when he was young. Never. And I'm not saying that you couldn't argue that we don't get a lot of information about Dumbledore in the books anyway. He's a very private person. We never find out what he sees in the Mirror of Erise, for example, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So yeah, you could argue that there was another brother who died when he was a baby and we just never heard about it. When you're working with a prequel and you have to over-explain everything you decide to add to a prequel, that becomes not worth it, in my opinion. It makes it harder to believe that this is the true history of what we already know. Because if you have to, like I said, if you have to over-explain the reasoning behind why this is true, even though we never heard about it 50 years later, I'm gonna go with 50 years later, we never heard about it in that history, then was it really that important to this big event that's going to happen? It's unbelievable, that's the problem. Let's go into the Mirror of Erise. Scene started where we see Dumbledore take the fabric off the Mirror of Erise. Both me and my little brother, who is 15, we both looked at each other and got so excited. Matt, my fiance, had no idea why we were excited. I like slammed my hand down. I was like ready. For all 7 books of the Harry Potter books, we don't know what Dumbledore sees in the Mirror of Erise. He claims that he sees socks. We know that that can't be true. Especially once we find out more throughout the 7 books of Harry Potter, we know that there's so much more he could be wishing for than socks. He did not live the best, happiest life. He had much to regret, so he had much to wish for. And so we never find out what he sees in the Mirror of Erise. So when that scene started, I was so excited. We get what he sees, which is the blood oath that we've never heard of before, which is fine. You can add more magic into something if you want. I thought that they did well. I know some people have complained about this, but one of the pros that I did like was this scene with them holding hands and the line where he says we were more than brothers. Dumbledore says we were more than brothers, talking about Grindelwald. I thought that that was a great moment that we can eventually get to if we're talking about Dumbledore being gay in canon. We already knew we weren't going to see anything amazing in this movie. I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I'm saying that we already knew that. So I'm glad that they're at least giving us something that can eventually lead to it. I also do have to say that, like, we must remember that this is set in 1927. Most people were not out. It wasn't something that we talked about as a society because it was inappropriate. So it makes sense that he wouldn't come outright and say, yeah, me and Grindelwald fucked sometimes. Like, it's just, that's not what would happen. And so I'm not saying that I don't want more. I'm saying that it is kind of realistic that it would be kind of just only hinted at, especially right now. I hope that we do end up seeing some relationship, like some romantic relationship between the two of them. If we're claiming that J.K. Rowling's statements are canon, then that I expect it. I liked that part. I liked that they hold hands. It felt really like emotional in that moment. I liked the line of what he said when he says we're closer than brothers. I was happy with that. The blood oath, though, feels like a very easy way to get around what we already know, which is an unbreakable vow exists. But if they did an unbreakable vow, it's literally called the unbreakable vow, and if that's what they wanted to put in there, then they would never fight. We know that they fight, that's in canon. So they had to make up something to give a reason for Jude Law not to fight Grindelwald earlier in the series than they want it to happen. He needed to have some reason to not fight him. I think personally that it would have been better to make it an emotional reasoning rather than a magical reasoning, but that's just me. One other just like really small thing that bothers me to no end. Let's talk about casting for a second. I'll talk about a pro and I'll talk about a con, and they have to do with the same character. Isn't it fascinating? So, one thing that I really loved that they did in this movie was they brought back Jamie Campbell Bower for the past tense Grindelwald scenes. I thought that was an amazing choice. I'm so glad that Jamie Campbell Bower was willing and could do it. I was so glad that they thought to bring him back for that. I thought that was an amazing choice. Grindelwald is supposed to be German. Johnny Depp doesn't do a German accent. He only really does one accent, and it's called the Johnny Depp pretends to be British accent. I don't understand. We could talk about the controversy of Johnny Depp all day long, and the fact of the matter is that movie producers aren't ever going to give a shit if we morally disagree with him being cast. What I don't understand is how we casted him when he doesn't do the character well. Like, if he could do a German accent, then I could see it. He fits, whatever, in whatever opinion that they have, he fits. He's a good name for the company, supposedly, whatever. He's gonna bring in money or whatever it happens to be, fine. But he can't fucking do the one aspect that makes, like, how come everybody but Grindelwald calls him Grindelwald? Like, I'm just saying, pisses me off. It's a small thing, but it was so distracting, and then it just made me hate everything else more because I was already distracted by the small things, and then the bigger things made them even bigger because I was like, you can't even get the small things right and can't do the big things right, so nothing is right. Let's talk about Queenie. Let me start off by saying that Queenie and Jacob's relationship in the first movie, the slow build, the cute eyes, and the ending scene at the very end of the first movie when you go into his bakery and he does remember the animals and all of that stuff, and she comes in and he remembers her. Amazing. I loved that scene. It gave me goosebumps. I was so ready to see more. Why did they do this? Like, we miss all of the character development to get us from this shock moment of holy shit, he remembers, to them actually being in a relationship. So it went from this amazing slow build to like boom, on top of the fact that Queenie is enchanting him. Now, I've seen some people complaining about like the love potion that we watch in the Harry Potter films. You can't undo them, you have to wait them out, and things like that. But in the movie they call it an enchantment. So maybe that's why Newt could undo it, and maybe that's why we had the lame heart. I feel like what's-his-face who's directing this has decided that he would rather see pretty things on the screen than make a movie that makes sense. I don't think it's working for him, but that's his own choice. We get this fact that Queenie is enchanting Jacob. Okay, I could almost buy it if we had any sort of background on why. We get all, which is very little still, all of the information about that is told to us after the enchantment is over. And this movie did so much telling rather than showing, and it pissed me off. Why did we find out about that by being told rather than being shown? Why? Like, why? Why are we being told everything? Like, it's a fucking movie. It's horrible on a page. It's worse on a movie. Why are you telling me this stuff? They did it with the same Yusef. I had to look up his name because I couldn't even remember it. Yusef is the older brother, but we'll get into that. All told to us. The prophecy of they like just skim over it. There's just like a slight sentence somewhere in the beginning of the movie that says there's a prophecy about Credence, we think. It's fine that they don't tell me what the prophecy is, but it's such a small sentence that, like, I mean, my fiance, he didn't even catch that, so he didn't know why everyone's looking for Credence, because it's such a small line. Back to Queenie. I could almost get on board with the fact that she might enchant Jacob. I could almost get that if we had had the background information. I almost could see, out of all of our main characters, if we had one that was going to jump on board with Grindelwald, I think that Queenie makes sense for that. However, it did not feel realistic. We did not get enough scenes with her. She has this mental breakdown in the street while it's raining, and the girl who works for Grindelwald finds her. First of all, how? When Grindelwald finally walks into the room where she is, she's scared of him. She has her wand out, she doesn't ever make a move, which is believable. That scene was good. In only one more scene, she goes from being that afraid of him and against him to not be willing to like try to duel him, but to at least be afraid of him, to being on his side. It just, there was something missing. Like, there was not enough arc to get from this point to this point. It did not make sense. I wanted to want it because that scene where she yells at Jacob to come with her, I wanted to feel it, but all I was doing was confused about why she was there. Also, side note, Jacob calling her crazy drove me crazy, because to just dispute her feelings by calling her a crazy woman pisses me off. That's called sexism. Interesting! Also, it just didn't feel right for Jacob. Like, out of all the characters, to be making just blanket statements like that is not him. I don't get it. That pissed me off. Let's talk about the Leta, Trina, Newt triangle. Actually, it's kind of a square, because then you got Theseus. One thing that really bugged me about this whole thing was just the fact that, like, it starts out with this weird misunderstanding. Also, told to us, not shown to us. Queenie tells us that Tina thinks he's engaged. And why? Why was everything told to us rather than shown to us? That's part of what made it so confusing, because it's just, first of all, there's not enough dialogue, and also all the dialogue is just telling us what we could have been shown. Why are we not watching the scenes of these things happening rather than just being told about them later? Tina thinks that Newt is engaged to Leta, which is his ex-girlfriend or old friend, whatever, woman that he was probably in love with in school. He had that photo of her in the entire first movie. We know that Tina is a little bit hesitant of this, like, jealousy, what's going on there. From movie 1 to movie 2, we kind of get that resolved a little bit at the very end of movie 1. He kind of explains, she hugs him goodbye or whatever, that ending where they get on the ship. Then we're not given any explanation for why she's suddenly angry except for Queenie. Again, showing not telling, telling not showing. And then we also watch throughout this entire movie, we see that Leta is in love with Newt even though she's marrying Theseus, which makes no sense whatsoever. I don't understand. We got no character development on why she gave up on Newt or whatever, and why she's now dating his brother. No information on why that's happening. We also get no information on how Newt feels about it, and I personally would love to see Newt not have a romance in these stories. There is so much going on, we don't need it. Like, we have the lovey-dovey couple of Queenie and Jacob, and I feel like their love is enough for one movie. Like, we don't need that. If we do actually get the Dumbledore and Grindelwald love story, like, I feel like we have plenty of romance in these stories that is overall not a romance. We don't need a Newt and Tina one, too. Or a Newt and Lena one, too. We don't need it. But if we're going to put him into a romance, fine. Fine. But make it make sense? Like, I don't understand why. What are we supposed to be rooting for? Now they've killed off Leta, which I'm pissed about because she was the most interesting character of our new cast. Like, why did you get rid of her? I'm annoyed. But you killed her off, and now Tina and Newt supposedly could just have nothing in the middle, except that now you have this dead woman who Newt loved for years, dead because of him, after she looked to both brothers and said, "I love you," and no one knows who she said it to. I mean, I don't. What? I just don't get it. And her death meant nothing, so why did we kill her off when she was potentially the most interesting one? I'm getting so annoyed. Like, there are so many plot holes in this movie, I just don't understand how it was even made. Moving to the Lestranges. Let's talk about this this whole prophecy and potential thing. So we have Yusuf, whose parents were actually in love and good people, blah blah blah. They have Yusuf. Then this other man decides he wants Yusuf's mother for his own. So he imperious curses her to come with him, and they get married. They get married, or at least they have a baby, which is Lita. And then she dies in childbirth, the mom. So then he finds a new woman and brings her in, and that is Credence's mother. So all three of these siblings are half-siblings from different mothers. So Yusuf is trying to avenge his mother and father, I guess. All of this is told to us and not shown to us. It's kind of shown to us, but like not enough. Here's the thing. If there wasn't so much telling rather than showing in the movie as a whole, that scene could have been done fine how it is. But because we had so much telling rather than showing, I was starved for wanting them to do a flashback like they did with the Hogwarts scenes and give us true dialogue with those other characters, those other people, the other actors in the scene. I wanted them to show us and tell us those scenes rather than having Yusuf talking and voicing over these silent moments. Like, just was too much telling. So we have this prophecy, and so I don't really get why Yusuf thinks that he is involved, other than the fact that he wants to kill Credence. But I don't get why he wants to kill Credence. I did not grasp it. I didn't understand why he was involved whatsoever. And then we find out that actually what happened was Credence and the true half-sibling were switched on this ship. What ship is it? Where was it going? Why were they on there? What the fuck's happening? No information. She switched the babies because the true half-sibling was always crying. And so that baby died. But Credence survived. So he's not truly a sibling of the Lestranges. And the servant, thinking that he was actually the half-sibling of the Lestranges, shipped him off to an orphanage in America to save his life. But I don't really know why he was in danger, so she ships him off. That scene with the servant when she meets Credence and then dies, I need to talk about in a second. But we'll get to the whole magic aspect of this whole piece of shit. Now he's not a Lestrange. In this scene, we also get to see the Lestrange family tree where the women are all just flowers and they only named the men. Okay, great. We've got some angry woman vibe for being silenced. Awesome. Doesn't negate the fact that Jacob calls Queenie crazy, but whatever. The thing that bothered me about this is also one of these little irks. Overall, all of that shit that I was just talking about, it wasn't well enough explained for me to be able to grasp this prophecy. If you want to give me a prophecy and you want to like explain it to me like they did in the first set of movie book, fine. Like I'll get it. I'll get on board. Like magic in the Harry Potter world, okay, let's do it. But you have to explain it, cause what? I still don't understand why they thought it was them. Like, why Yusuf was involved really is the key. Like, I can grasp why they think Credence is the son. If they think that he's the Lestrange, whatever, despairing daughter. Although, like, why do they think she's despairing? Because they don't know about her secret that she switched the babies. So why is she despairing then? I don't understand. I don't get why everyone assumes that Credence is this prophecy child. They didn't explain anything, but that's okay, whatever. Moving on to my one small irk is that they show this family tree, right? It comes up and it looks an awful lot like the same family tree that Bellatrix Lestrange is involved on. However, Bellatrix Lestrange is actually a black, and the family tree that we saw in Order of the Phoenix is not the Lestrange family tree, it's the black family tree, but it looked really similar except for the part where the women aren't named, which could have just been a generation thing and that it changed. And I don't know if it was just like, oh, like we had a family tree from before, let's bring that idea back, or if they fucked up and they were like, oh, family tree, same family tree, Lestrange's involved. I don't know, like because this plot was so messy, there are so many things where now I'm thinking like, was this also messy? I can't hold on to the fact of like, ooh, I caught that, because I'm like, did I catch something bad or did I catch like an actual good plot point? I don't know. I can't tell anymore. Let's talk about some magic problems. One of the ones that I really want to talk about is Credence. Credence is an Obscurial. We think that he's dead. At the end of movie 1, has not survived that final blow up that he had in the end of the first movie. We are then told that he survived. What shitty writing to just, oh, Credence survived. Like, that should have been a big reveal. That should have been a big moment for us. Like, as viewers, we should have been like, oh, holy shit. What were you doing throwing away that line? That could have been a big emotional moment. Especially because, realistically, like, Credence, because Ezra Miller is playing him, I honestly think that's why. Credence is a pretty, like, beloved character from the first movie, and then he died. And so, like, you could have gotten a really positive emotional response to finally revealing that he had survived. But instead you just threw it away at the first 5 minutes of the movie. What were you doing? We watch him and Nagini, which, like, a whole nother can of worms, but we watch him and Nagini go to see the servant, who he thinks might be his mother, and we find out that she's the servant, and whatever. She was there, she put him in the orphanage to save him. We still don't really know why she thought he was in danger, but okay. In that scene, you have the guy from the Ministry of Magic, or whatever he is from, trying to catch him, but he's actually a Grindelwald supporter, and so he's trying to catch Credence. What? What are you doing? You scared the shit out of me. Credence goes in and talks to the woman, the servant, who gave him away to the orphanage. We see him after she dies and after the Ministry of Magic person who's involved with Grindelwald shows up. He Obscurials and, like, does this and blows up the place and then comes back and, like, hugs Nagini. So, like, now he can kind of control his Obscurialness, which doesn't really, I guess it could make sense if it was explained, but it's not being explained, and so I don't understand why. Unlike in the first one, we were seeing him progressively get more and more out of control, which is why we thought that he dies at the end. Then this one, now all of a sudden he has some control. He can come back to himself, and, like, just, we never got anything more from that, and no explanation whatsoever. So, like, again with the plot holes. Another thing about the magic was just like, okay, so that port key didn't work like a port key in the past, and so, okay, what was that thing that Newt did to make him be able to see what happened last night? Blows orange magic all over the place, and then he can see that Tina was there, and he can see that there was a man standing there staring at her, and she was staring at him. How? What was that? He had no explanation of what he was doing there. Another small thing that really pissed me off is that in the Hogwarts flashbacks, two things of this actually. In the Hogwarts flashbacks, both Newt and Lita are wearing blue, but they are a Hufflepuff and a Slytherin, so why are they wearing blue? I was told by somebody, I can't remember who mentioned it, that they were wearing their Hogwarts colors on their ties, but that it was so small, and the blue, and I was just like, wait, what? And then another thing about the flashbacks, Dumbledore taught Transfiguration. So, okay, again with the pandering to the Harry Potter fans, they recreate this scene that Remus Lupin did with the boggart, and they have everyone show, you know, go up. And it also is some telling of, like, Lita being made fun of because you have those girls and, like, she's afraid to show everyone. That was a nice scene throwback for us, except that why was Dumbledore the one teaching it, other than the fact that they wanted to use Jude Law more because he's barely in the movie in the beginning. He didn't teach Defense Against the Dark Arts, he taught Transfiguration, so what were we doing with that? Let's get to Grindelwald. So, other than the fact that he doesn't have a correct accent, Grindelwald is not like Voldemort. He is one of the darkest times of history prior to Voldemort, but for a very different reason. And in the first set of books, and in all of what we know before these movies, we know that Grindelwald is kind of a comparison to Hitler of our history that we already know. Like, it's obvious that that was where J.K. Rowling got that idea from, and like he was a Hitler. So talking about Hitler and what we know about him, and talking about Grindelwald and what we know about him, they are both supposed to be very charismatic leaders, very like, come with me, and then they got some followers who did know what the fuck they were doing and were pieces of shit. And they did also get followers who didn't necessarily know that what you know, Hitler was trying to do was murder millions of people. Like, he was so charismatic in his leadership that people wanted to believe that he could change the world for the better, and then it turned into this horrible moment in history. But you don't see that in this movie. You see a Voldemort-style evil character. He breeds fear, he leads through fear. He is not a charismatic person. So when we get this big, you know, arena and he's speaking and all this stuff, it fell flat for me. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that people would be watching him going, oh yeah, like I could get into this. In theory, that's who Grindelwald should be, so that scene should have been really cool, but I just didn't believe it. And then also talking about magic, that age line thing that then turned into that type of fire that we see in book 7, movie 8, but also that fire should have been red if that was the type of fire, but it was an age line also. The age line magic made sense because he like put the thing of like, if you can pass through it, that means you're devoted to me. The age line in number 4 is if you're the right age, you can pass through it. That magic made sense, and then all of a sudden it turned into the weird like fury fire, whatever it's called. Keep with what you already know about this world. Like, you have to keep within the magic system for it to make sense. That was something small. In that scene also, we have these visuals play of, you know, the tank comes forward and like lands on Jacob and Queenie, although it doesn't hurt them or anything. You get a nuclear bomb going off and all this stuff. So none of that has happened yet though in the history of humans. This happens in 1927. The nuclear bomb doesn't happen until the 30s, I think, if I remember my history correctly. Is this visual something like a prophecy? Because prophecies don't work like that. Either you're changing the magic system again or your timeline is off, and I don't know which one it is. I did like that idea that like humans are gonna destroy the world, so we need to help them. That idea of that charisma, that would have worked if we didn't already watch him not being a charismatic person. Moving into the very final scene, we meet Nicholas Flamel earlier in this movie, and then he comes back at the final scene. That part where he is told by the photo book that he needs to be a part, and he says, I haven't seen action in years, and then he goes. 1, his makeup was atrocious. What were they doing? 2, what is that? Who is he talking to? No explanation yet again. And I think that if it was just that one scene that didn't have an explanation, we wouldn't be as mad about it. But because nothing was ever explained, then it's just like everything. We're just like, why wasn't this explained? Why wasn't this explained? Why wasn't this explained? So then he shows up. And they do the Finite Incantatem curse, which is something we've seen before. It ends a spell. And I understood why they needed more wizards. It's a very powerful spell. They needed more wizards to be a part of taking it down. Okay, fine. But no one explained why they were putting it into the earth, and no one explained why Nicholas Flamel was required to do it. Newt and his brother Theseus show up after Nicholas Flamel has explained we need to put it into the ground. They pop out of the thing and then they know to put it in the ground. So why was Nicholas Flamel required for this scene? I don't know. One more thing about magic and then fucking with it. We are told time and time again in our previous knowledge from the Harry Potter movies and books that you cannot apparate within the grounds of Hogwarts. It's a big deal in the story. So suddenly 50 years before that you can? The Ministry of Magic just pops up on the grounds of Hogwarts and apparates onto it to talk to Dumbledore in the beginning of the movie. And it's in the trailer, and I remember being mad in the trailer watching that. I was like, what are you doing apparating on the grounds of Hogwarts? It's like one of the key rules. I'm sorry I'm going back and forth so much, but I can't like keep track of everything. We had all this information about Yusef being the half-brother of Lita, and then Credence maybe being the half-brother of them, but then is not, blah, 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 blah. We also have that line from Tina, and then Newt agrees with her, that there's evidence of an unbreakable vow on him. But nowhere near anywhere does they ever explain what that is. What unbreakable vow? Is that part of why he's going after Credence? Nothing's ever explained. So why bring it up, I guess? And this is, again, I think evidence to show that there were probably scenes cut from this movie. Same with the Nifflers. In interviews with people, they kept saying, interviews of people in the movie, they kept saying this should be the movie about the Nifflers, but like we only ever saw one Niffler, and he was in it a lot. He was very important to the story, but we only saw the one, even though the note in the very beginning of the movie to the employee that never shows up ever again, Newt wrote that he took the baby Nifflers with him. Evidence that scenes cut from the movie. The last thing I want to talk about is something that I just don't understand why they brought in this plot if they weren't going to do anything with it. So we get that crazy circus scene, and we see this wizard is holding magical beings, magical creatures, magical wizards and witches captive. And so it's obvious that they show him in a negative light, but then we never hear or see him ever again. So why did you bother bringing him in except to introduce Nagini, who, why did we need to bring her up? Like, it felt again like pandering to Harry Potter fans in the wrong way, like name dropping type thing we did not need. And I don't understand why Credence and her have this connection, because yet again we have nothing explained. So why do they care about each other? No idea. So the few things that I do want to leave on a positive note, there are a couple things that I did like about this film. Just Newt. I just love Newt. I also loved the past Newt casting, the flashback Newt casting. I thought that kid actor was great, and I think Newt is great. I wish he had more screen time in this movie. I also wish like everything just made more sense, but that's fine. I loved the Niffler. I loved how important the Bowtruckle was to getting them out, stuff like that. I really just liked the casting of the young people to the old people. Like, I thought that most generally that was really well casted. And I loved that they name dropped Weasley, although I'm disappointed that we never actually saw who Weasley was. They name dropped him twice. Where was he? Who was he? Which actor was he? I have no idea. I think that's all I have to say about this movie. In general, didn't like it. I'm really disappointed, and I mean, I'm gonna see the third one because I want to see how they can possibly try to fix it. I feel like this movie was trying to be very info dumpy, but it just none of it made any sense. So I'm hoping that they can bring some of these plot lines into a true plot line, like linear, making sense thing. So I will go see it. Like, I know I will, so I'm not gonna say I'm not, but this one left me highly disappointed. I just don't understand anything that happened. We probably are supposed to be a little bit confused. Like, obviously we didn't get all of the answers in this movie, but I feel like they didn't do a good enough job giving us the information up until this point to feel like, okay, I understand what's going on to a certain extent, and now I can't wait to know more to understand it in full. It just felt really messy. And again, I feel like there were scenes missing, and whoever did the final cuts of this movie made horrible decisions. I still don't understand why they chose Johnny Depp as a German person and he can't do a German accent. That's, I think, where I'm at, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. You can always hit that notification bell to be notified every time I post a video. I post every Wednesday and Saturday, and I'll see you guys very soon with a new one that hopefully will be a little more positive. Bye! I wish I could take all the things